Hi, welcome to In the Loop on County Cable Montgomery. I'm Neil Greenberger, and our special guest today is County Council member Nancy Floreen, who just completed a one-year term as Council President, her second term as Council President. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm glad to be here, Neil.
We're going to talk about some of the things that happened in the past year and some of the things ahead. But before we talk about some of those things, a lot of people who serve on the County Council don't ever get to be council president. Some people, maybe once. You had a chance to do it twice. Pretty rare. And I was wondering, in those 4 or 5 years in between, in your second term, did you approach anything differently? Anything you learned from the first term? How to deal with council members, how to deal with the job, how to deal with people that made this easier, harder, or just different?
Well, when I was first council president, that was in 2010. And I had already been on the council really for 7 years. Right. It was an election year, but I was pretty comfortable in dealing with people. I don't know that I changed, no doubt. I hope I've gotten smarter over the years. Like to think
well,
that.
You started pretty high up, so.
I don't know. You know, my experience with my colleagues, and really with any group, is you have to, be accessible. You have to talk. You have to visit on a regular basis. When I first started on the county council, we spent a lot of time in each other's offices, just sort of chatting, getting to know each other, working through, throwing ideas, throwing those things around. And I think that that is a style that I imprinted on, and I've tried to do that, especially as council president. I chair the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, and I've always been on that since I've been on the council. And that has for me set a pattern of spending time with my colleagues, just making sure that how they were thinking about issues, so I knew how to manage our land use work. And so I suspect I just continued that experience as a council president. The 2 times have been really, really interesting. Last time I was council president, it was the year that the economy fell apart.
Yeah, good choosing.
And it was unbelievable. Like every couple of weeks, I get a phone call from Ike's office saying, our situation looks worse than we thought. And it went on like that throughout the budget process. And it was really an interesting and really, really challenging time. I have to admit, I like it when it's hard. I mean, that we have to work through complicated issues.
Not everybody does.
No.
Yeah.
But the thing that people don't appreciate about the role of the council president, basically your job is to run the meeting. You do control the agenda to a certain extent, but not that much. But what you do control is how the council approaches the budget. And that year, in 2010, Mr. Leggett's budget was out of date the day after he issued it. And we had a terrible time. We had to adjust employee compensation big time. We had to cut back on a lot of services. We had a battle royale with the Board of Education about treating employees consistently. And it was really, really, really interesting and hard. Plus, we were in an election season. So we were all running for office. And so I had to try to keep an even keel of positive thinking during a very, very difficult time. And I'll give my colleagues credit. We all held hands and made really hard decisions that year.
Well, you made some pretty hard decisions this year.
Well, and I was going to say, and this year was not, although we didn't have the sky falling in terms of the budget, we did have the issue of what we were going to do with schools. And I decided as soon as we received Mr. Leggett's proposed budget, which, by the way, what's interesting, what other people don't appreciate as well, the county council has more authority over the budget than almost any legislative body I know of. We can add to it, we can subtract from it, we can adjust everything. We have a great amount of power. That's far more power than the state legislature has. And consequently, I view the county executive's budget as a set of suggestions, really valid and thoughtful ones, but not the end-all and be-all. So for us, the question is, what were we going to do about schools? How were we going to fund them? And what were we going to get for our money? The schools had sent over a budget that had asked for a significant increase, but the vast majority of those dollars were just going for compensation expenses. Really weren't adding a lot of value to the budget, to the process and to the delivery of services. And we saw that right after we got the budget. I sat down the leaders in the school system, the unions, and said, we're not going to, and after talking to my colleagues saying, we're not going to do it this way. We will give some thought to increasing your budget, but you have to commit to us to devote those dollars to improvements in the system, not just compensation. And it's a real tribute to Mike Durso and the Board of Education. They agreed to do that. And we had a really, a much easier time of working out our Education First budget this year. Certainly in 2016, it was a far more positive relationship than the experience we had in 2010.
Well, another change in gears this year, something you've been involved with for a long time, was disbanding the county's Department of Economic Development and forming an independent corporation, the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. You've wanted to see this. Now the question comes, what difference will it make, and what do you want to see them do that just hasn't been done and their new independent authority can do? I know you just informed this. I know you've been involved with it. You just didn't walk away from it.
Well, I've been pushing for this for a very, very long time, and actually it was my legislation that created the precursor to this. But I think the recession caused everyone to agree, everyone who'd had qualms about privatizing economic development, that it was really time to do things differently. And everyone came around, and I give great credit to the county executive. They agreed to move it out from under their auspices. So the whole issue here is that Montgomery County, as part of the Washington, D.C. region, never had to think that much about how it sold itself. Because we've always been pretty much a child of the feds. A lot of federal employees here, a lot of federal contractors here, and really that was the gift that kept on giving. We don't have manufacturing plants that closed during the recession, but we also saw sequestration and the cutback on federal spending, and that made everyone come to grips with the fact that we had to grow our own economic base more effectively than we've done up until this point. So I'm very optimistic about this. The job of this Economic Development Corporation is really to sell Montgomery County, sell it to the private sector, internationally, nationally, and frankly locally, support our businesses and help in creating a positive experience for investment here in Montgomery County. What we know is that our demands for resources aren't going to go away. Our school system is always going to need to eat up half our budget, more or less, and there are significant other needs that need to be addressed here as well. And we can't ask the taxpayer to pay for all that without expanding the tax base.
In that same realm, as chair of the Fed committee, our planning committee, you've overseen some master plans that are going to change communities, guide them, not just in the next couple of years, but 10, 20 years down the road. Big one coming up is downtown Bethesda, which really is the the heartbeat of the county and the state, really, in many ways. How do you see that shaping up in the next year? And what do you think Bethesda's going to look like in a few years when we're done with this plan?
Well, you know, these master plans and long-term visions, they are not project plans. They're going to be constructed in the next year or two. We're excited about Marriott, and we know that's going to happen in Bethesda now. So this plan will reflect what the Marriott presence, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, there may be a little bit more height here and there in Bethesda. It's interesting, historically speaking, Bethesda now is just a little bit over the levels of growth anticipated in like the 1974 plan, something like that. These plans take a very, very long time to evolve and build out. I think what you're going to see in Bethesda, though, are more interesting buildings with new development, with more attention to green space, and a better pedestrian environment. That's always the challenge in urban development. How do you serve the economic needs of the area while at the same time creating a space that people feel comfortable in? And don't overwhelm the adjacent neighborhoods. Certainly they're concerned about what this all might translate into. And it's really hard to deal with this in the academic sense, which is what we're doing in a master plan. As individual projects come through, you know, that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of how these concepts fill out. You know, when we talk about increased height, we don't mean it for the whole block. We just mean like one part of the building might reach that level sometimes, and that allows for more variety in design, and it helps with the scale at the ground level in terms of more open space. So that's the tricky part about all this, but because most residents who have concerns are thinking, oh, brother, there's going to be this huge awful cardboard box that is, you know, yay high and yay wide, and it's going to block my view, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to destroy my expectation of what it means to live in this area. And it's very hard to disprove that until an actual project comes through the pipeline. You know, I don't know how much Bethesda is really going to change. I think that we'll see some more interesting buildings, probably.
Oh, it's amazing. Whenever you're on with us, we've run out of time, and we always need to have you back. Before we finish up this time, you have 2 more years on the council. Just because you're not council president doesn't mean you don't have priorities for this year. What are you hoping to see in the next year? And is there anything in particular you'd like to accomplish in your final 2 years as a council member?
I can't say I have any grand plan in particular. I hope to guide the council through the master plans we have on our plate in the next couple of years. We have North Bethesda, we have the Davis Tract area. We have a few places where we're dealing with urbanizing suburbia to a certain extent. How much is too much?
Always a good question.
But you know, the problem is we have these empty office buildings. So how do we get them into some kind of productive environment? You know, or should there be housing there? Should we reconstruct schools so they fit into those buildings and use up that space? There are some interesting ideas out there. We shall see. That's the thing that's great about being on the county council. We always get exposed to new ideas and really get a chance to try them out on a skeptical community. And it's a great intellectual exercise. It's a great challenge in communication. And at the end of the day, you know, it helps us make Montgomery County the terrific place that it is.
It's a good way to end this. I want to thank County Council Member Nancy Floreen for being with us. I'm Neil Greenberger. Thanks for joining us in the Loop here on County Cable Montgomery.